Hello, everyone. Welcome to the GLORIO Chat, the best anime podcast on the internet. We have reached the end of another season, and as I promised last episode, we will make up for the the short and completely off the rails preview we did last time, and talk about the end of the God, what is this? Spring 2021 season?
What a season! What a season!
There was a lot of good shows this season. A lot of things that we were watching. A lot of things that.
Is this the best single season like we've had
in a very long time? Yes.
I think in terms of like new number of good shows, yeah, like.
I will admit I don't have a very good memory, but I will say
fair.
for my memory, like this is the best single season of anime I think I have watched in probably years. I can't think of another time where I have just like thoroughly enjoyed just about basically everything I've watched in a single season. It's legitimately very impressive.
All right, well, this is pretty much our last opportunity to talk about a lot of these, so
Indeed.
Yeah.
now's the time to empty the tank.
Exactly.
Oh boy.
Put it all out in the field.
So before we get started, let me introduce everybody. I'm Jel. I'm joined by Iro.
I'm still here, not dead yet.
We're joined by G.
What's good, everybody?
And for the first time, we're joined by Peter,
You all right?
the newest member of the GLORIO crew here. Although you have way more on-air experience than any of us, I'm pretty sure, at this point. But, how long have you been doing your radio show?
About 11, 12 years now.
Yeah, so that's that's a lot more on-air time than us for sure. But yes.
One might call that venerable,
Yeah. An institution.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, no, we're glad to have you joining on here, and we're gonna talk about some anime.
Indeed.
Sounds good.
So, we got a lot to cover. Let's just start diving into it.
Oh, we sure do.
I'm gonna make us eat our vegetables before we get to dessert here.
Starting with a showstopper.
Yum yum.
And,
Yum yum.
let's talk about Back Arrow, which you guys have somehow
Yes,
managed
Baka
to.
Yaro.
You guys have somehow managed to grind through both cores of here.
We did it.
This is we sure did.
So what's the final? We haven't been really talking about Back Arrow week to week because I don't want to.
The
But
fuck is there to say?
Yeah.
what's the final verdict on Back Arrow?
This is what I
wrapped
I would charitably say this is a 3 out of 5 show, and leave it at that with some fun bits.
That's
some,
high,
and
huh?
some not fun bits.
I would say that's charitable considering we speak of shows like Majestic Prince as 3 out of 5 shows.
Oh man, Majestic Prince was alright.
Majestic Prince was like way better than Back Arrow. So...
I mean, Majestic Prince has got to be a 3.5, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't do half stars, alright?
Okay, yes.
Okay.
We don't do half stars. Because if you do half stars, then you might as well just say 7 out of 10, right? Mm-hmm. But, yeah, no, Back Arrow, it was, like, I mean, consistent.
Yeah, alright, I'll give it
So,
that.
all right. First of all, tell me how did they wrap this up? Because
They
did
fought
they get
God.
past the wall?
All
or
right,
whatever?
yes, they it is revealed that the weird fat man who juices up with wine as if it's some kind of bane venom revealed his true power, became thin, and revealed that he is the agent of God here to harvest all of Lingolind, everything within the walls. So everyone says "nuh-uh," and joins together to fight God.
So, going forward, this is not very fair to this show, but I'm going to be using a lot of Gurren Lagann analogies to explain.
Oh no!
like,
Again, we established it's fair because of the writer.
Yeah,
and-
so
yes.
basically to establish what Back Arrow is doing, and then using the Gurren Lagann analogy to explain what Back Arrow did so horribly wrong in comparison. So, like... basically, the long and short of it is that Back Arrow, Baka Yaro, is basically the Nia of this show. He is like...
Right.
He is like the herald, the Silver Surfer, who's been sent by the anti-spiral equivalent to kind of herald the destruction of Lingolind, of mankind. He doesn't want to do that, though, so, like, the heroes band together to basically snap him out of it and, come back to normal and all this stuff. And, King Master Asia shows up and does a lot of really cool stuff. And yeah, it's just like it's very like I can't believe I'm saying this about a show written by Nakashima, but it's like very paint by numbers and not in a particularly impressive way. Like
just phone this one in, basically.
It kind of feels like that. Like he's kind of just going through the motions of what a Nakashima mecha anime is supposed to be, and like it's all done with such a like drab presentation and execution. It's just hard to cheer for any of it. Like that's kind of just the pervasive theme across all of the final 4 episodes. It's just like, oh, this would have been really cool if it had been, I don't know, directed by Hiroyuki Amaishi instead.
It's like when the freaking giant dreadnoughts are literally combining so that they can punch God in the face, and I'm like, I should be way more excited about this.
And it's like the most weakest, limp-wristed punch, like,
right.
punch God has ever received.
Is that a case of, like, they did not do the proper work to invest you beforehand so that when the moment happens, you don't really care?
I think that kind of is a lot of it because, like, here's the thing. As much as I love really high production values and impressive animation, like, I can be impressed by something exclusively by its narrative context. If I have often mentioned this concept in relation to, professional wrestling as it comes to anime, is that billing is very important in anime. Like, how you sell the characters, how you build up the fights, the anticipation, like... And Back Arrow just never really does it. It never, like, despite the fact that they're literally going to fight God, again, like, this is a very Gurren Lagann-esque escalation, I'm just not that excited.
Yeah.
Like, their God is just not a very impressive individual.
Right.
Uh-huh.
And, if you
So
don't
they
if you don't
go-
like the cast and, you don't like it's...
Right.
Like, what are we fighting for, right?
Exactly.
And, so, I mean, in the most dull way possible, everyone teams up and they fight God. They defeat God.
okay.
Yeah,
Who was
and
actually...
So fake
yeah.
China teams up with fake Europe, and
Yeah, basically. And, like, in a very, like, almost, like, 13 Sentinels-esque, like, turn of events, like... Basically, they reveal that the whole world of Back Arrow basically takes place in the Matrix, except what if the Matrix was on a, like, eternal colony ship designed to protect and transport the last remnants of the human race?
This is getting worse the more you describe it, but yeah.
Right,
Except all the human race died except for one baby. So
God.
the
So
ship
yep.
AI puts the baby into eternal stasis, but the baby has to be fed through the like
willpower of all of the beings in the
who
world.
live
God.
in the Matrix.
Uh-huh.
And
Yep.
that's why God is doing what he does. And it's like, here's the thing, right? Like, again, to compare to Gurren Lagann, what was the Anti-Spiral's motivation? The Anti-Spiral's motivation was essentially that spiral power, left unchecked, would lead to basically the heat death of the universe, right? That spiral power is the power of entropy. It is the power of moving forward,
Would lead
right?
to the big crunch.
Exactly. And thus the Anti-Spirals had to position themselves as the antithesis of that, right? The ultimate stasis, the ultimate stagnation, so as to prevent mankind from moving forward.
Yep.
As simple as that is, and that's the thing, I'm describing this as in very heady terms, but realistically what this means is that the Anti-Spiral grows into a big robot that looks evil compared to Gurren Lagann.
Yep.
Like, that's the thing, right? Like, you don't
Right.
necessarily need to move heaven and earth to create a compelling conflict. The enemy can literally just be, I'm
Bad
you, but
me,
mean.
yeah.
And that can work if you put in the work setting up the stakes and the escalation and the characters. And Back Arrow does none of that. And so as a result, despite the fact that, like, Nakashima is, in fact, utilizing many of the similar tricks that he used in Gurren Lagann, Back Arrow just doesn't have any of the energy, none of the flair, none of the spectacle.
So, how much blame are you putting on Nakashima versus blame on Goro Taniguchi here?
Goro Taniguchi has directed some good things in the past. Like, that's the problem. Is like, I can't just throw this all at him because he has done some great work, but I don't know. I just don't think he was the right fit for Nakashima's, like, kind of madcap, off-the-wall style.
Is it just like they both liked each other's work and wanted to work together, but once they actually came together, it was like this did not.
They didn't actually have that much chemistry, maybe.
Right.
Like,
yeah, I wonder.
Yeah.
Well, that's disappointing, I guess.
Yep.
Although not entirely unexpected, given
no,
this
really,
is
like,
over the course of
Basically all we saw coming, I think.
right. So that is why I say Back Arrow is nothing if consistent. And
yeah.
I think that's the thing is, like, I know some people who are, like, really rallying behind Back Arrow. I know a lot of people who are like, oh, Back Arrow is like the dark horse, like, mecha anime you've all been sleeping on. And it's like, no, look, as the GLORIO chats, like, you know, host, like, grumpy mecha fan, let me tell you, like,
this ain't the one.
like, it might be a drought. I'm still not gonna drink out of a toilet. Like,
How many of those people have watched Grand Helm?
right, exactly. All these people. Oh, you're all sleeping on Back Arrow. It's such an underrated. Fuck you. Go watch Granbelm. Granbelm. Where were you? Where were you when Granbelm sold like 160 BD copies? Huh? Like where were you people when Granbelm was getting ignored by every like fucking like a critical fucking anime news blog or whatever? Like,
yeah.
Where were you all when Anafugo did nothing wrong?
Yeah.
Oh,
I feel like
man.
people supporting Back Arrow are like just like seeing it for the show they want to see and not what it actually is, because like on paper it sounds like
Oh, yeah, on paper,
throwback.
Or just like the small cabal of like Goro Taniguchi fans.
Right.
People who think Active Raid and ID Zero were super good.
Yeah, well, having not seen any of those, I guess I can't speak to that, but yeah.
Well, shout outs to Planets.
Yeah. I'll give one last final shout out to just go watch Gun X Sword, and we can be done with Back
We
Arrow.
really
I guess.
should have done that instead of Back Arrow.
I've told you guys so
Yeah.
many times.
We really should have just watched Gun X Sword instead.
All right.
Yeah.
Maybe next season.
Well, we can say goodbye to that one,
Yep.
and let's
See
talk
ya.
about something good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Let's talk about Vivy Fluorite Eyes song, which we now know what that means, I guess.
Yeah.
Since we last left off, God, when was the last time we talked about it? They
had just done.
they had just done the final time skip with
I think did Vivy had she already written her song by the? I think yes. The last time
Yeah,
we
I think
left
that's
off,
about where we left off,
She
where
wakes up in the last episode and
Right.
everything's gone to shit.
the last thing we saw was all the robots singing her song.
Yes. Which
Yes.
Still an amazing stinger at the end of an episode.
So I guess before we get into details, overall I thought the ending was good, and this is gonna be a theme for me on this season, where I don't feel like any of the endings were bad, but I was not particularly like blown away by any of them either. I will say I will give Vivy credit for not taking the worst possible route that I thought it was going to take, which was to pull the Avengers Endgame, go back in time to different points, and redo
The
all
whole timeline.
Yeah, and then end up like saving all the people that died, and like
Right.
like they actually committed to the robot
like
apocalypse happened.
Yeah. Like
And-
they're fairly committed to the idea that it is too late for Vivy to like prevent the apocalypse. All she can do
Right.
now is mitigate it. I come away stronger on the Vivy ending. I know it's I know it's somewhat controversial. I know some people have not enjoyed kind of its final choice, but I think that like I will agree that I think the last episode is fairly predictable, because just for context, since this is we are doing our recap, like the penultimate episode has Vivy and the moderate like faction of Toei kind of launching this like kind of final in a very near Automata-esque manner, launching their final assault on the big AI tower to try to deactivate Archive. So they reveal that Archive, the sort of like pervasive AI like cloud storage solution of the future, has been angling for the destruction of mankind this whole time.
Big
and
shocker.
I actually think this is a fairly effective twist, if somewhat predictable, because, like, Vivy and Matsumoto have been talking about this whole singular point plan this whole time in Archive.
Right.
Like, and it's very much
right,
like
yeah.
they intentionally, like, position Archive as such a, like, passive
Non-entity,
background element of the, like, story that it's like the equivalent of, like, discussing your plans for terrorism in a Discord chat. You know, it's just
Right.
like you sort of forget that, oh wait, this is technically, like,
Right, a you do not own this server. This is
right, exactly. Yes. So, like, for Archive to essentially reveal that actually the second you started talking about the Singularity Project or whatever, like, I have known about the next 100 years, and I've been able to, like, adjust it accordingly to counteract all of your actions. So I thought that was actually pretty good.
And Archive has no qualms about, unlike Matsumoto, who only wants to show up at the most important junction points. Archive has no issue nudging things during all the rest of the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And so the penultimate episode is kind of them launching that assault and then it failing, right? It falls apart, it all goes bad, and basically Vivy realizes she needs to be sent back in time one more time, but this time only 3 days into the past, mainly so she can just sort of redo the final events of the story.
And I like that they frame that as, this is your actual last shot. We can't just time loop this. You know, we can't Groundhog Day with this one.
Right. This is not a stable time loop. They explicitly leave the original Dr. Matsumoto to die in the final loop, so that there is no going back. But this does give Vivy enough time to rescue the Toak moderates who are being attacked by the rogue androids.
Right.
And, you know, the rest of the episode kind of plays out as you expect, right? It's the big epic finale. Vivy, does her music number.
The title drop.
I have been listening to the titular Fluorite Eyes song quite a bit over the last week. It's a good song. It's definitely one of those things of, like, it's definitely, like, I mean, the song's not mind blowing. You know, it's a very decent, like, kind of pop track.
Normal, yeah.
But, like, it's definitely, like, the power of its narrative context elevates it to a whole new level of, like,
yeah.
You know, like, every part they get to the part of the song where I remember is also the part in the anime where Matsumoto is rushing in to stop the last satellite from crushing Vivy. And
I was getting a lot of, like, Macross Do You Remember Love vibes out of that.
Yeah, that's a very good analogy.
Where it's, like, singing a pop song and in the background there's, like, intense action happening.
Very intense things happening. Shout outs to Elizabeth again, who
yes,
gets a lot of work done in that last episode.
I mean, we keep talking about the importance of building up to your climax here, and I feel like while that final moment is extremely predictable and kind of what we all figured was going to happen, it's very effective because, like, when she's singing her song and, like, falling apart and, like, all the screens with her memories are popping up and everything, it's like, oh man, what a journey we've been on, you know?
Yeah.
It's very effective. But
it is very much the embodiment of Vivy's thesis that the heart is, like, you know, the memories that you have experienced, right? Is the collections of your life experiences, and that is kind of what makes you an individual. And I think that, again, somewhat predictable, you know, like, very, like, this is, like, you know, some of it normal, is, like, admittedly fairly bog standard, like, AI personhood sci-fi, but I think, again, like, performed very well. And with all that, like, I have my own thoughts on the very, very ending of the episode that I'd like to get into, but I'm kind of curious what your guys' thoughts on the very last scene.
So are we talking, like,
post-credits?
After
yes, like,
Vivy is back?
Yes, quote-unquote Vivy's revival. Yes, I'm curious what you guys think about that, because I know it's a somewhat controversial, it's become a bit of a contentious sticking point with some people in the Vivy discourse.
Yeah. Well, let me ask Peter, as someone who has not had a chance to talk about the show on air yet. What did you think of the ending, and I guess leading up to that final bit?
So I kind of want to move back just a little bit, the, like, penultimate episode, because at the end of the episode before the final one, and we're like, oh, just go back in time a bit again. That bit got me kind of angry because it was just like, oh, that just kind of, that whole episode was kind of a waste of time now. And I guess that was kind of the point, but also kind of not. Like, I don't know. I was just like,
yeah,
it felt a bit of a cop out.
Yeah, I kind of agree, because I think I would have preferred like not leaning back on the time thing again, but they did, like I said, I think they did balance it out a little bit by not, like, this really is your last shot.
Right.
Yeah,
I feel like
again.
they have to, if in a story where your original power is time travel, I think for the climax they have to address on some level, why don't you just do it again if it didn't work.
Yeah,
Right.
the killing of Dr. Matsumoto was, as you said, very much a, right, this is your last chance, no do-overs now. And I guess that makes sense. As for the very, very ending, it was like, I don't know, I felt like they didn't need to do it. Like, if they ended it at the end credits before the post credits bit, that was it. That would have been fine. But now they've got, oh, Vivy's still alive. Well, in some form with short hair now.
Right.
I guess.
Yes, you have to cut your hair after a major.
Sell
like,
the
changing event.
short hair figures.
Anime rules. Yeah.
Yep. And I mean, I guess it does open it up for more stuff in the future, but that always rubs me up the wrong way, because I'm like, you don't have to, like, sequel hook yourself.
Yeah.
But I mean, on the other side, it is a bit more feel good in that Vivy's okay, Matsumoto's okay. It's very mixed feelings, I guess. to sum it
Yeah.
up.
Right.
I think that is entirely fair. In fact, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is definitely an aspect of the ending that I find myself, I think, in conversation with, and I think there's for that reason, I think I do come out the other end a little bit more positive. But so in a lot of ways, I think the ending of Vivy, I think to me it very much gets a lot into the roots of, like, Buddhism and its interaction with the concepts of life and death, and more importantly, like, in a lot of ways thematically speaks to the part of the story that we kind of passed over, which was the diva incarnation during the Antonio arc. Like, in many ways, that diva was also a new incarnation of Vivy, and kind of speaking to, like, the implications of that diva incarnation's personhood, and, like, you know, the like the faint lingering traces of memory that she could, like, that she felt in her despite being an entirely new incarnation.
Right.
And so, like, essentially, I think the reason why I like the ending is that it is bittersweet. In fact, I would not go as far as saying that, like, Vivy coming back at the end is a convenient happy ending, or even a sequel hook. I think it is more, it speaks to, like, for those who are listening who have played the game Nier Automata, essentially
We have to keep bringing it up because there's so many, like, parallel
yeah.
themes
Essentially
going on here, but yes.
You know, essentially the ending is that Vivy dies so that Vivy can live. Like,
Right.
that Vivy that is alive at the end is not the original Vivy. And that is the tragic part, right? Is that the Vivy we knew, the Vivy that we spent so much time with, like, struggled so much and endured so much tragedy specifically to ensure that, like, there would be hope for the future. That even if she would not live to see that hopeful, better future, that maybe some form of her, some incarnation of her, would be able to live a life, like, in peace, right? Like, and there's no guarantee of that, of course, right? The ending very much seems to imply that, like, there is a pretty strong backlash against the AIs, right? Like, Elizabeth is sort of, like, implied to be the last the last of her people in a ways. But I do like it, right? Because, like, this new Vivy is a different character, you know? She is, in essence, you know, a new incarnation, almost like the progeny of the original Vivy. And like progeny, she will retain some facets of that old personality, some lingering mannerisms and thoughts, but this is a whole new, you know, kind of like the time loop, right? This is a whole new chance for Vivy to live a life that she never got because of her, you know, chance crossing with Matsumoto. And framed in that way, I found myself pretty profoundly affected by it. I thought it was a strong finish, like thematically to the story that Vivy was trying to tell.
I wasn't really thinking about it from the perspective of the Vivy we know is as dead as Diva was at this point. Like, this is a new person, which kind of puts a different spin on it. I was kind of more just indifferent on it because it felt just like a throwaway. You know, if you're not really if you're not really thinking about it, it does kind of feel like the throwaway, like Peter was saying, sort of, tacked on thing.
I get why people feel that way,
but yeah, no, I think that makes a lot more sense. As far as putting in a bow on the overall theme of what were we fighting for in the first place, right? Could they have illustrated that in some other way without bringing Vivy back? I don't know, but it works. Iro, did you have anything you wanted to add on that as far as the ending bit of it?
I was also under the impression that the final scene Vivy was not the Vivy we had followed during the show. Sort of like we made a new version of her almost as a tribute / quote unquote reward.
Might not even be the same body or anything, right? Just
right.
Like
just like we
replica.
we quote unquote rewarded the hero by giving their new, like, by creating them anew and allowing them to live in the peaceful world or whatever.
Right.
Like that sort of thing.
Maybe like an ignorance is bliss. The memories of the whole struggle are gone, and
right.
You get a fresh start.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, I think that's kind of why I mentioned, to me, it very much feels like a show or an ending that is in conversation with the concepts of reincarnation, right? This idea that Vivy's
rewarded
previous
in the next,
exactly.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'll say, since we brought up the sequel hook question, I do not want to see another.
No, I do not think Vivy needs a sequel. I don't think it should, and that is why I don't see that ending as a sequel hook. But
yeah, so I don't necessarily think it was either. But if that's even a question, we don't need a sequel to this. It was a great standalone series. The story's been told.
No, this is the type of show that I live for.
The one-off
standalone 12-episode original that says everything it needs to, and then kind of ends gracefully. And I hope it stays that way.
Talk about a surprise, though. Just like
right,
for sure.
None of us, I mean, I didn't think it was. I mean, we really didn't know because we didn't really have a lot of information when it came out, and just it's arguably one of the it's definitely one of the best shows this season. You could argue. I debate whether it's actually even my favorite. Just so many of the things that I love about anime are in this series.
Yes.
The sci-fi themes, singing robots, cool action scenes. Like, there's a lot going on, and
it is definitely the show that I think for me largely succeeds on the back of its presentation and execution.
Yes,
it has a very focused idea of the story it wanted to tell, and it largely achieved it. Right? It's I would say its ambitions were not as grand as the likes of, say, a Dynazenon or something. But
yes,
I think that by setting its focus at the appropriate level, I think it did largely manage to achieve almost all of its stated goals.
Yes. And while it does do in the big picture things, it doesn't do anything particularly new, but I feel like in some of the details, it manages to carve out a lot of its own identity in how it's world building and things like that make it give it sort of its own personality.
Yeah.
And just the execution is top notch, and I just love when like you said, the show has a goal and it hits that goal, and
exactly
mission accomplished.
And also, I think this is also be a pervasive theme of this podcast in this season. Shout out to the cool AI buddies, shout outs to Matsumoto who really came around in the end. I think some
he was
people
such
were
an interesting-
disappointed that Matsumoto did not end up becoming the villain, but I kind of like that by the end there, it's like you become truly assured that no, Matsumoto is a friend. Matsumoto is an ally, and
I think it was. I think it's arguably more interesting the route they went, going from someone who was more antagonistic in the first couple episodes to developing into. Because it's not just Vivy that learns things throughout this journey. Matsumoto does as well.
Oh, totally, yeah.
We see that by the end. So, yeah, and I think tying it into the real life doctor and everything was a nice twist that reinforced that. But
yeah, shout outs to that cube, Matsumoto, am I gonna say this? The second best AI buddy of this season.
Who are we calling the first?
We'll get there.
Oh, we'll get there.
Oh, okay. I was gonna make a companion cube joke, but I can't.
No,
think
let's
of
not.
anything fast
How
enough.
about we don't?
Yeah, that's real relevant in 2021, I'm sure.
Matsumoto
But,
is a far better robot cube than any other robot cube I've seen.
do the kids these days even remember what the companion cube was? I don't know.
I don't know, man.
All right. Great show. Let's
Yeah.
move along.
Oh, this is the big one for me.
Oh, this is going to be the big one. Okay. Let's talk about Megalobox 2 Nomad. This is finished, right?
Yep.
We watched it what, an hour ago?
About an hour ago.
2 hours
Hour
ago.
before
Yeah.
So this
recording.
This is still pretty fresh, so of course, to everybody listening, there might be a little bit of recency bias here, but
So
dude.
the ending was good.
It was
Nomad-
good. They delivered.
Nomad's good. Dude, Nomad is great. Like, Jel, I know you watched like a little bit of season 1 and fell off it. Even if you didn't finish it, I think it may be worth checking out season 2. Like just jump into Nomad. Like,
I will say the things that you've been talking about all season, the story ideas and themes and things sound way more interesting to me than what was going on in season 1.
I think you should check out Nomad if you have the time, because it is spoilers. They stick the landing.
Is this the rare sequel is better?
Yes. Nomad is in every way the superior sequel.
Okay.
So here's my fucking back of the box quote, but like Megalobox 2 Nomad is like the most wholly uncompromised work of the year. It has a distinct message, a thesis about like the story it wants to tell, and it never once deviates from that path. So, to give some context, there was an interview with the director Yo Moriyama along with screenwriters Katsuhiko Manabe and Kensaku Kojima about kind of the inspirations and the actual sociopolitics of what inspired Nomad. And one of their primary talking points was about how the original Ashita no Joe was this hot-blooded tragedy about dying in a blaze of glory. And sort of how it was explicitly an embodiment of toxic masculinity. And how, with Nomad, they wanted to tell a story that was in conversation with the original, but also one that intentionally contrasts itself with the original. And so, this all comes to a head in Nomad's core message, which is basically that the only way to escape the cycle of violence and toxic masculinity is to make the conscientious decision to basically stop playing the game entirely. And that's exactly what Nomad does.
So, does Joe not have one big last fight?
He does and he doesn't.
Okay.
So, to give some context, the final few episodes of Nomad has been about Joe reconciling with his found family, making good with the people he left behind all those years ago, and kind of achieving a new level of self-actualization that the original Joe never came close to achieving. In contrast, we are introduced to the deuteragonist, Mac Time Rosario, the sort of people's hero.
The like new rising star in megaloboxing, who, was paralyzed, was saving children from a fire, and
Right, we talked about him last time, yeah.
all that. And
his title is the public hero.
the people's champ.
Yep.
Yes, quite literally.
And how the experimental tech that allowed him to return to boxing is also quite dangerous to his brain, and and such. And he goes through his own arc of, like, wrangling with that, simultaneous with Joe's journey.
And it's, like, really effective because even though Mac gets less screen time, like, the penultimate so here's the thing. The last 4 episodes of Nomad are maybe some of the strongest, like, self-contained, like, fiction I have watched in years. So like, the last, like, so, like, episodes, like, what would the equivalent be? What was it, 9 and 10? Yeah, so, or 10, 11. 10 and 11 are basically about Joe's self-actualization. There's this wonderful moment where, like, so again, that interview, right? That interview with Yo Moriyama is a fantastic interview. It's on Anime News Network. I highly recommend people read it because it really speaks to just like how
link it in the notes.
It just speaks to how thoughtful the creators were about this show about dudes punching each other to death. And like, it's easy to say all this stuff in an interview. It's much harder for me to believe, do you actually mean it? Will you actually commit to it in the show? Nomad does. There's literally a moment in episode, like, 9 or something, or 10, where, like, Joe is at the grave of Nanbu, and he's confronted by Aragami, one of the guys he fought with in Season 1.
Yeah.
And Aragami basically becomes, like, the voice of the audience, where he quizzes
So what
Joe.
did you learn?
Right, he quizzes Joe on all of the themes of the show to make sure that Joe has actually internalized it, right? Like, Aragami's like, so what did you learn, Joe? If you fight again, are you going to fight for the right reasons? Like, you know, will you run away again? You won't, right? And
right.
Joe answers in the affirmative to each and every single question.
Right.
To obliterate any doubt we might have had in his growth.
We were able to have the scene where Joe says, actually, I did completely fuck up everything for completely selfish reasons. And even though I'm going to go back to the boxing ring, because this is a boxing show and we need a climactic fight, I'm doing it for the right reasons.
Yes.
And not for the self-destructive machismo of Season 1.
It's magnificent. You have a protagonist who literally looks in the camera and admits he did everything wrong. And he takes full responsibility for it. It's...
Wow, so when we're talking about this as the counterpoint to the original Ashita no Joe, and we were worried they weren't going to commit to it, they not only committed to it, they doubled down and...
They do. It's magnificent. And so, like, Joe has basically already achieved his emotional and character climax by episode 11.
Right.
So then episode 12 is all about Mac.
Right.
And
how Mac wants to do this match as well. And go ahead.
and Mac is in many ways intentionally positioned as Joe of Season 1. He wants this fight because that's what fighters do, right? But his life is falling apart because the best chip in his brain is making him increasingly unstable. It's very intentionally designed to sort of be like a sci-fi analogy for, like, PTSD, because, like, loud noises, like, trigger his, like, fight or flight responses, like...
Or being in danger, right? Like...
He grows increasingly violent and, like, protective over, like, resources that he perceives to be limited. Like... He's dangerous. He is dangerous to his loved ones, and this all comes to a very, like, kind of sort of traumatic head, you know, when he almost, like, harms his own child, and he kind of, like, runs away from it, goes on a bender, starts drinking in the streets like Joe was at the beginning of Season 2. But then he himself is also sort of saved by those around him. His old buddy, his partner from when he was in the police finds him, and kind of helps Mac remember, like, what he fought for. We are given a flashback where it reveals that Mac was also an immigrant, like Chief, you know, who came to this country, you know, like, and had to struggle to find his place in the world, and found his place through love, through relationships with the people he cared about. And so, by the end of the penultimate episode, Mac has also reached self-actualization and has achieved a sort of, like, peace of mind and clarity to his convictions.
Right. We can go into the final final boxing match here, where there's not necessarily anything, like, on the line for winning or losing to the point where they need to really push themselves. They just both want to fight each other out of mutual respect for another boxer.
Conversation with fists.
It's wonderful. The penultimate episode might actually... It's so good. It's so good. And then the final episode. The fight actually happens. And the fight's okay. It's a good fight, you know. Like there's the original Megalobox theme from season 1 plays.
Yeah.
Like Joe and Mac are fighting, and but the really like fun, like beautiful thing about the whole fight is like, yes, it's a boxing match. It might also be the most holistically ethical boxing match I've maybe ever seen in my life, because both corners are constantly checking, like, okay, how are you feeling? Like, emotionally, how are you doing? Are you feeling okay? Do you feel
It's
good?
like we will
your brain numbers
we will call
okay?
this thing. We will call this thing at the first sign of.
That's
And
the
that's
thing.
what happened. Right, like
Joe in the 10th episode has a heart-to-heart with Sachio, the one who was the most like reticent to make up with Joe, and Joe's like, I fucked up, man, but I need you. Like, I don't trust anyone else more in the world to protect me than you, Sachio. I need you in my corner. And so Sachio says, like, the first whiff I get of your self-destructive tendencies, the first hint that you are enjoying this for the sake of the bloodlust, for the sake of the fight itself, I will throw the towel. And Joe is completely okay with it. He's like, yes, good, I need that. Because Joe recognizes, like, as much as he's improved over the season, Joe is still that junk dog from season 1.
Right.
He can't help it. He likes the fight. He likes the thrill of the violence.
Right.
And some people just can't help it, right?
You can't just flip a switch and make that
No.
go away, right?
So what you can do, however, is surround yourself with a safety net, with a support net of people who will be there to pull you out of it when it happens. And that's exactly what happens. Just as the fight is reaching a crescendo, just as Joe is getting that manic grin on his face again because he's bleeding and getting the shit beat out of him and he's remembering this is what he lives for, Sachio throws the towel and ends the fight.
Yep. Like before it can quote unquote get really going.
Right.
And thus,
Yeah,
both
it's over.
Joe and Mac get to live to see the end of this.
Right. I mean, yeah. Infamously, original Achino Joe dies at the end, having burned himself out, basically.
Right, to win the fight. And that's like it is anticlimactic. Like, I won't lie, I felt a pang of like disappointment in my stomach. I was like, oh man, this fight was just about to get good. And then I like took a step back and realized that's exactly what they wanted me to feel.
Right.
Because like, yes, I, the audience, am disappointed I didn't get my fight. Like, who the fuck am I to be disappointed that these two people didn't kill each other? Like,
Yep.
they get to live. They get to spend the rest of their lives with their family and friends because they didn't fucking kill each other for my enjoyment. And that's like a really wonderful, beautiful realization to come to, is that like everything about the penultimate episode was setting up like, if this fight goes through, one of these people is going to drop dead. Like,
Right.
and the whole last week, I was thinking in my head, I thought for hours, how would I write a way for Nomad to end with both of these people living? And I couldn't come up with one, right? Like, there was too much, like, at stake. There was too much, like, baggage for both characters, right? Mac is unstable because of the best chip. Joe has had years of drug abuse, like, slowly deteriorating his body. Like, there was no way, if these men decided to go all the way to the finish, one of them was going to die in the process. And I couldn't think of a way out. And it really speaks to, like, how my own perception as a member of the audience got wrapped up in the constrictions of what the boxing genre, the fighting genre, is known for, that I couldn't think of the most obvious solution
Right.
of all,
Where they just stop the fight.
maybe
Right.
they just stop the fight. And like it actually is maybe legitimately one of the biggest twists of this season. It threw me for such a loop, but in such a good way. Like, and it is thematically perfect, right? This whole season has been about like the meaning of pride and what pride actually means, and if pride is even a worthwhile concept to hold on to when like there are so many like better things in life to live for: loved ones, your family, the community you are a part of. And I'd said all season, yeah, but they're also gonna punch each other because it's Megalobox, right? And this is what I mean when I say Nomad is the most uncompromised work of the season, because no, Yo Moriyama said that's not what the story is about. And so I'm going to make sure that even the ending stays true to the thesis that I have written for this whole show.
That's really impressive.
It really is. I like yes, on some level it is a little of an anticlimactic finish, but like thematically, narratively, like
Right,
Oh
so
yeah,
like,
not
what
at
you
all
do,
from that
yeah.
perspective.
we
Right. Yeah.
like, look, I love a lot of the shows that have aired this season, and like maybe some of them overall on average might rise above, but in terms of last episode, I think Nomad is the best. I think it has finished the strongest of any show I've watched this season.
Is this like the like when we had Akudama Drive finish real strong. As an example.
Yeah,
Even though that might have not been the most consistent show, that ending was so good.
Yes, that is how I feel about Nomad. It's unbelievable. I'm like, I am so impressed by what Nomad has done.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said going into this, the shows that, because I didn't watch Megalobox, and the shows that we all watched that are overlapping, I wasn't blown away by the endings. They were good, but like I there's nothing I'm gonna have the enthusiasm for that you have the enthusiasm for Megalobox right now. Like, and it makes a big difference. Your last impression.
Yeah,
it does.
Makes a big difference.
Indeed means a lot.
I think that, like, and that's the thing, as this season, or as this year goes on, as we approach the end of the year, I think that feeling is only going to grow stronger, because eventually my disappointment at the anticlimax of the fight will fade away, and what will stay there is the memory of, like, Nomad earned its happy ending. Like, that's the thing, it doesn't feel like a cop-out. Like, that's the thing, like, if you want to compare this to Vivy, both Joe and Mac living doesn't feel like a cop-out. They earned it. They spent like 6 episodes developing these two characters so that when in the end, like, they both get to live and like enjoy the rest of their lives, it feels like this show has truly earned it, and I think that's going to stick with me like for a very long time.
Right. Yeah, and end of year anime debates are going to be tough this year.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
Yeah, and of course, shout out to Mabanoi's OST again. His soundtrack, much heavier, like, Spanish influence this time around, but, like, very good. Very good. Like as always, right, it doesn't even need to be said, but, like, of course, the presentation of Megalobox continues to be spotless. There are a couple moments in this last run of episodes. Like, there's one episode specifically that it's almost funny how many musical drops it gets. And, like, but all the musical drops are not for, like, big fights. They're all for, like,
emotional
really
moments,
wholesome, emotional, like, realizations for the characters. So, like, it's a character, like, realizing, like, oh, I don't have to engage in this toxic cycle of violence. And then you hear the blah, blah, and it's like...
Yeah.
so good. It's like really, it's such a fun use of like the soundtrack. But
all right,
what a show! I'm over the moon with it.
I'm glad they pulled that off. You know, like we said in the beginning. You know, when you go into sequel territory, it gets dangerous, right?
Oh, for sure.
Oh yeah.
And we were not sure. You guys were not sure where this was gonna go or what, and. I'm always glad to hear when they, you know, make the sequel into its own thing, or in rare cases even something better, rather than just kind of rehashing, you know, what they already did. And it sounds like that was the case.
It is the most unnecessary sequel that has ever proved itself over the course of its 13 episodes.
All right, well, let's move along. I'm gonna get my Super Cub minute in here.
All right, let's do it. So this is finished, right?
Yes, so Super Cub has finished. They made some questionable choices in the final arc.
Oh dear.
They might have gone too far with the Super Cub worship.
Too far?
In the final stretch.
You telling me the show that has constantly been about like looking the viewer in the eye and saying, this can only be done with a Super Cub,
went
too far?
So the entire second half of the series has been about the girls trying to figure out how they can keep riding in winter.
Okay.
So, like, basically, the main villain of the show is cold. And so every episode,
winter at it again.
Yeah, every episode is like them like trying to find some new piece of equipment or something that's gonna mitigate them being freezing while they're riding their bikes. And more specifically, in the last couple episodes, I think last time I had mentioned they meet the third girl who's the student council president. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I've been expecting her to join the group and get her own Super Cub, because she's in the OP from episode 1 with the Super Cub. And it doesn't happen until the very final scene of the series.
Huh.
Instead, they kind of go on this dramatic arc where... How would I put it? they need to make her feel inferior enough to the girls that have super cubs.
Wait, to shame her into
dang.
like
To
FOMO? Like
If you had a super cub, you could come with us.
Yeah,
Oh my
but
God.
they do this in the most like serious, dramatic way possible.
Okay.
So after I think I talked about last time, they do the big school festival thing. That's how they meet the class president. Mm-hmm. She's the class president, not student council president. Class president. I need to be more specific on that. But
of course.
So the class pres is like so impressed by them that she wants to like hang out with them and everything after this. And so they kind of get to know each other a bit, and the class president has, you know, this completely inferior and quite frankly pathetic regular bicycle. What? And the girls on the Super Cub kind of like pity her as they see her, you know, riding to the store on her regular bicycle or whatever.
Let's drive past her and flip her
No,
off.
I mean they're not mean about it. They're just they almost like feel
like
bad
patronizing,
for her.
like, oh
Right.
my God, that's.
And so this like culminates to this extremely dramatic episode where the class president decides, like, first of all, her dad explicitly tells the other girls, like, yeah, I think she's trying to be just like you, riding her bike all the time now. And this culminates in she decides to go out to the store like in the middle of the night in like the dead of winter, and she gets into an accident where she falls into the river.
Okay.
And rather than like calling an ambulance or calling her parents or whoever,
Call
she
the
calls this
Super
girl
Cub.
who's like, she calls this girl who, like, I'll point out, they're not even really, they're like friendly acquaintances.
Uh-huh.
Man.
She calls this girl who's like a friendly acquaintance for help because she has a Super Cub. And the main girl comes out to rescue her, and like she's like, no, we don't need to call an ambulance or the fire department. I have a Super Cub.
That's the greatest line in the world.
No,
Red-
you're not
red
hurt.
cross on
I'm
the
just gonna
Super
take you back. Like she's visibly hurt. She's like holding her shoulder and stuff. She's like, nah, you don't need to go to the hospital. I'm just gonna carry you back in my Super Cub. She like sticks her in her basket on the front of her Super Cub and brings her home. She's like, yeah, just take a bath and you can sleep it off.
God and devil are nothing in the face of a
Super Cub.
And like every like the main girl has at this point lost all agency. Like she gives all praise to the Super Cub when she does anything good. Like the girl is like thanking her for helping her, and she's like,
It wasn't
"Don't thank
me.
me, thank the Super Cub."
So are you telling me this girl's personality has been subsumed by her eldritch Super Cub?
Yes, basically,
Like-
she's like a Super Cub warlock at this point.
Super Cub.
Christ.
So she brings the girl home and like, and you know, she's like, go ahead, you can stay here and sleep it off, and the class president gives this like tearful speech about, you know,
Wow.
how
Super
she
Cub.
hates the winter and you have to just make it go away and all this, and the main girl's like, that's one thing my Super Cub can't do. Yeah, so that happened. And so they kind of you know, after they kind of skip a little bit ahead and they're like, well, spring's coming, let's go see the cherry blossoms, and they decide to just end the episode on like 20 minutes of the girls driving through Japan, which was actually pretty good. It was
all right, yeah.
It was like, you know, pure uncut 100% like fun slice of life in the final episode. But they tie the whole thing together at the very end when she's like, the main girl is talking to her other friend, and her other friend's like, I'm surprised you agreed to go on this trip, because it was like a multi-day trip driving across Japan. They want to go to like the furthest point where they can see cherry blossoms at like the end of Japan. I forget which direction they go in, but the main girl kind of wraps up. She's like, well, she tells the other girl about what the class prez's tearful speech and everything. And she's like, at first I was like, well, no, I can't make winter go away with my Super Cub, but then I thought maybe I could, and that's why they went on this trip to go see the cherry blossoms, because her super cub can even make the seasons change, and that's kind of where they end it. But yeah, I feel like they went a little too far with it. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
But overall, I still very much enjoyed the series. I was very much surprised how, again, we talk about taking a simple premise but just executing on it well.
Right.
This could have been just another school club show with
cute girls doing cute things.
Cute girls riding motorcycles and eating cake or whatever.
Could have been Bakuan.
Well, Bakuan exists in
Bakuan's its own weird shitpost.
Own weird category.
Yeah.
But it could have been. I mean, I could probably. I can't remember the name of them, but there's at least 2 other like cycling shows with cute girls that I ended up.
I believe you. There's so many.
I'm trying to remember the name. There was one where like the girl actually forgot how to ride a bicycle, which
I watched Long Riders. If that might be.
Yes, I think it was Long Riders.
Yeah.
Where she forgot how to ride a bicycle in the beginning. But
Okay.
Yeah, but no, but this was just very well executed. I really liked the characters and how they developed over time, even if they went a little too far in the final couple episodes.
Mm-hmm.
The main girl went from this quiet person that felt like she had nothing going on in her life, and by the end she's like a pretty strong character, like at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And
I mean, I think there is a message to be said about like the first time a teenager gets their hands on a vehicle and like the freedom it offers. Like,
yeah, there's definitely that.
Like, I mean, this might be like a uniquely American concept, right? But like most teenagers will eventually get a car of some kind, right? And it's like kind of like the newfound like, oh, I could just like, I can just go, right? Yeah, like I don't, if I, it's, I think that could be a fun theme, and I think using a vehicle to represent that is, like, yes, it's a commercial, but also I think that like the way you describe it, Jill, it sounds like they were pretty like sincere about that being like one of the key aspects of the story.
Yeah. I mean, there is an actual like, there are actual like thematic elements and character development going on outside of being the Honda Super Cub commercial. So there's plenty of that, and when that comes up, I just find that hilarious. So
sure.
Yeah. So yeah. That's a good one.
So Jill, you gonna get yourself a Super Cub or what? I mean,
I don't know that her friend's Hunter Cub looks pretty cool. I don't know.
I did Google these Cubs. I was like, all right, I gotta see what's going on here. It's like
when her friend gets the cool Hunter Cub, I was like, all right, I could see myself riding that.
Yeah, the Hunter Cub. I was like, okay, that's halfway towards being a proper bike. I could.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I don't want like a big fast motorcycle. Like, I would just want something, riding around town or whatever. So who knows? Maybe the commercial worked.
The much more expensive version of Gundam Build Fighters.
Well, what is your life total gun costs?
I will say it's not a number I want to say here, but I say I'm pretty sure it's still smaller than the price of a new Super Cub. So.
Okay, lifetime.
Yeah, I'd still say so. Yes,
you got to be getting close, right?
Let's not talk about it.
All right. We need to move on.
Yeah, let's move on to 86.
86.
Yeah. You guys toughed this one out too.
We sure did.
Did the white savior end racism, or what happened?
No.
Okay.
That's actually probably the more interesting part of it is no, she did not.
I'm like looking at this show and I'm like, if I tweaked this, and this, I would be really satisfied with this show.
86 is like, so I don't know if I actually said this on the podcast, but 86's individual parts are greater than the sum of its whole.
Yeah.
Like, each individual piece of 86 is actually remarkably well done. The problem is it all comes together into something that's just not very compelling or interesting. I think that, like, even with its ending, I like its ending in theory.
Yep.
Like,
agreed.
It doesn't end with them ending racism. They don't even stop the bad guys. Like, the 86ers, go through with their hopeless suicide mission, and then it is implied that they die, in a blaze of glory. I mean, so spoilers. I don't think that's actually what happens. I'm pretty sure that at least Shin is still alive,
has been confirmed,
especially because season 2 has been announced.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
So I bet the rest of the 86ers. Yeah, I bet they're dead. But him, the main character, he's definitely
the last
fine.
episode is just the commander visiting the battlefield, going to their old headquarters, and
is that guy the one that keeps surviving through them?
Yeah.
I remember them mentioning that in the beginning.
The Grim Reaper archetype in military fiction, right? The sole survivor of every squad.
Right. So yeah, he's definitely still alive.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But so that's the thing, right? She doesn't fix racism. She doesn't end this literal genocide. She doesn't. She can't. She's one person. One of the show's main themes is what can you do on your own? And the reality is not much. And so holistically, there's a lot I should like about 86. As the GLORIO Chat's resident military fiction glutton, I like a lot of the things 86 does. The problem is that I also don't like a lot of the things 86 does. I just think that and a lot of this is centered on Lena, the main character. Is that I don't think because she is meant to be the she's white guilt personified, right?
Yep.
But the problem is that she never really goes beyond that. It's one of those things in fiction of the author, who is God of the narrative, can tell us that this character's intentions are good and sincere. Right? The author could say, no, I mean it. This character definitely is 100% sincere about their intentions. But if it doesn't show in the work itself, it's kind of hard to swallow.
Yep.
The show takes endless pains to insist to you that Lena really does care about the 86ers, that she really legitimately is invested in their well-being, but it never results in anything really physical or tangible until the penultimate episode. And so that moment, which should be this heroic moment where she finally manages to get the 86ers some little bit of help, it doesn't feel like they earned it because she hasn't been doing that this whole season. So this is basically the first time she's actually given the 86ers any tangible physical help instead of just friendly platitudes and encouragement. So
right, it's performative, right? They want to just the important thing to them is making her look good by telling us that she's a good person rather than showing us that she's a good person.
And the last couple episodes I think are actually pretty bold directing choice, right? So after the big heroic battle where Lena is able to help, the 86ers continue on their mission into the heart of Legion territory that is beyond the communication range of Lena, right? So it is very much this we're going into no man's land and we're not coming back, so goodbye. And so the last two episodes are a weirdly deliberately paced journey of these people on their last mission to their most assured deaths. And it's a beautifully directed couple of episodes. The 86ers are kind of embarking on this journey through the remnant, the abandoned settlements of mankind, right? These overgrown cities, nature is reclaiming the world. It's beautiful. It's really well done. It's a really pretty show, and it's kind of just them kind of coming to terms with their deaths, right? In this beautiful world, this beautiful but also deeply unjust world they've found themselves born in, and I should like it. I should really like it, but because I don't give a shit about any of the characters, it all kind of just falls flat.
Yeah.
There's a really wonderful moment in the penultimate episode where this whole time they've had this AI baggage robot following them around, right?
Right.
It's an AI
carrier who's hauling the bullets.
Yeah. It's an APC robot, right? It carries the ammo and the supplies, right? And it's kind of implied to have a somewhat self-determined AI thing in it. But this is like a really like cool way to justify a flashback. Is that suddenly at the end of the penultimate episode, we kind of get into we go into the mind of the AI baggage robot, and it turns out it's been recording the actions of the 86ers this whole time, right? And in a weird ways, it is their last testament and will, right? Like, these people, most of them are dead. Nobody will mourn them. There are no gravestones for them. The only being in the world who ever remembered that these people lived are the ones who survived them and this one robot that recorded their lives. You know, and it's this fun montage of like, you know, them living life, going through, you know, both the good moments and the bad, right, the hardships, but also like the moments of like kindness and brightness that these people shared with each other, right, the moments that they shared with their friends. And like, it's actually a pretty affecting moment because, like, again, this robot is the only one who will ever remember these people lived. And then like it cuts to the very end where it's revealed that like the robot is like bleeding out because it has been hit by artillery fire and its memory core is dying. And so this one thing that remembered these people lived will also like die soon as well. And so there will be no one left to remember these people. And like, you know, it's got the thing of like the oil is leaking out of its robot eye and it looks like it's crying, and
oh wow.
It's effective.
That's
it actually works. It actually works surprisingly well, especially for those of us who, you know, are always going to have a soft spot for fun AI buddies. I would say that this baggage bot is probably the 4th best AI buddy of the season.
There's quite a few of them.
There are quite a few this season. And again, this should be a magnificent moment. Like, this moment is actually, in terms of its directing and execution, is up there with some of the best stuff Nomad did. The problem is that the billing was bad. It's showing me the lives of these characters I don't care about, that I didn't learn anything about. So, like, all this effort, all this directorial skill, all in the name of, like, just characters I don't care about.
Yeah.
That I can't bring myself to care about, even now.
Yeah.
Ira, you mentioned things you might tweak. What would be some suggestions?
Just like, I think the ending of like nothing was fundamentally changed except now like we have somewhat more respect for the plight of the soldier and can maybe start working towards helping them. What works fine in a vacuum. It's just like plot details that make it totally fall flat regarding like the true nature of the conflict and stuff like that.
So you guys are talking about the problems here with 86. Do you think this is a question of like the writing or the execution, or I guess I'm also a little wary that there's another season and the story's ongoing too.
I think
right?
there's the writing. It's mostly the writing because I think the execution was actually pretty strong.
Yes.
The whole way. It's just like the source material is kind of janky.
Yeah. Like,
So-
having talked to like people who are like fans of the anime, like I've heard a lot of them actually claim that this adaptation is in some ways even superior to the source material. So like, you know, if this is already better than the thing it's based on, then
Right.
You know.
My understanding is that the original light novel was written as to be a standalone for a contest where one of the rules was it had to be a standalone, and then it got popular, so they did more stuff.
which is always a winning combination.
I mean, I'm not going to say it can't be done, but I mean...
No, of course.
And it's just a lot of the stuff that I would have cut to make the season 1 a like better story, in my opinion, is stuff that is like more twists to add depth to a sequel. So it should have been more standalone. That's what I'm saying.
More fat to be trimmed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say, this is like the weird take I arrived at the more I talked about 86, is that I would love the hell out of the 86 that is a video game. Because like it made me realize, oh, like what is the core thing that keeps like annoying me about 86 is that its cast is so like distinctly underdeveloped. And like but then I thought, well, then how come I like Valkyria Chronicles so much? It's not like the characters there are that much deeper, but you spend a lot more time with them, right? Like, even though these characters are basically just like stock anime archetypes, you spend like 40 hours with these guys, so like, you know, it's like, okay, you're like the germaphobe girl, but you know what? You're my germaphobe girl with a machine gun. So, you know, like...
Yeah, you have time to endear yourself to them before they get thrown into the
the meat grinder. Whereas like 86 is just like, I mean, I think it's a good thing that it is so like committed to like killing off so many members of its cast, but also like we know them so little that it doesn't have much of an emotional impact. So like, I do think, ironically, in a lot of ways, the story of 86 I feel like is almost better suited to like a video game than an anime.
Yeah. I just got the impression from the first like 2 episodes or however many I watched that the writer didn't really have a great plan and was just kind of using these interesting themes as set dressing and more or less than he actually had a plan of what he wanted to say with it, you know?
Right.
But it's again, it's always disappointing when something's not just outright bad and has interesting things and has a lot of potential.
Yeah.
And that doesn't quite hit the mark. But, all right. Let's move along and talk about Odd Taxi.
Now,
let's go.
What is this show? I don't know. But
well, as Dobu so helpfully explained, Odd Taxi is the plan to steal the 10 billion yen.
Yes, we got the name drop in there. For
such
sure.
a good title drop. I fucking lost it. What a
again, Peter, as someone who has not had an opportunity to talk about this yet, and you are watching this, right? Odd Taxi.
I funny enough, I watched episode 1, like when it came out, and then left it for like a month or so, and then Yuri was like, "Oh, this is actually really good," and then I just binge watched it. So,
quite a ride it takes you on from the first episode.
Sorry, go on.
Oh no, you go ahead, Peter.
Oh, I was just thinking, like the most recent episode had the one thing you've probably said this on the podcast before, but the one thing I really love about Odd Taxi, all the way through to the most recent episode, is how everything is tying together, and like things that seem completely irrelevant in like episode 1 shows up in like episode 12.
Right.
Like a certain eraser, for example.
Oh, it's so well done, right? Like it's that.
I'll
really
point out
exciting...
we did call the eraser, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I did. So I want to say, just for the record, that I was one of the people who early on was like, do you know what ditch is in Japanese? It's dobu. So like, ditch 11. Like, I just want to say I had called that from very early on.
You did detective work on that one.
But I will say, yes, that speaks to the grander like appeal of Odd Taxi, which is like so many of these elements that initially don't seem that important. Like, it is that fun thing of like, the really fun aspect of a mystery is like, the moment you see something that triggers a latent part of your memory, you instantly realize, oh, this is where it's coming into play.
It's like you realize it like 1 second before they officially
like,
reveal it.
Exactly, right? It's really effectively done. And the latest episode, which, you know, because unfortunately, because of the timing of our podcast, we will not...
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. This is not actually over. There's one as of recording, I think by the time this comes out.
By the time this podcast is out, you will all have seen the last episode of Odd Taxi, but right now we are in the dark, which is a shame. I would love to speak to this show with its finale, but I think we could still speak to just the really fantastic ride this show has taken us on. I definitely think that Odd Taxi is definitely one of the strongest in a season with many strong contenders, you know, like depending on how Odd Taxi ends, right? Like you all heard me like how breathless I was about Nomad. If Odd Taxi ends as well as Nomad, oh, we got ourselves a fight at the end of this year. But
I'm having trouble envisioning I don't know. I have no idea what's going to happen.
So the
in the
thing
end
with
at
Odd
this
Taxi, so the reason why I love Nomad is because it stuck the landing of its thesis, right? So the thing with Odd Taxi that I need for it to stick the landing is admittedly a little bit shakier, right? Because it is this grand mystery narrative, right? And so I think much of Odd Taxi is going to hinge on how satisfying the answers are to that mystery. And I think that for for the most part, they've actually done a pretty good job of wrapping up most of them. The problem is, like, or not the problem, but, like, the thing that I think we are all still, like, speculating about is, like, who killed Yuki Mitsuya? How will Otokawa get out of his current situation? And, like, what is going to happen to these people, right? Like, there are so many, like, unknown factors here, and, like, I'm very curious if they will be able to answer all of them in a satisfying manner. You know,
we also have the question of the doctor's been investigating Otokawa's background.
Yes.
There's still something going on with him that we're not being told yet.
Yeah,
right.
But yeah, I think, like, you know, it's not so much like specific moments, but I think, like, the really strong thing about Odd Taxi is just, like, how well they have managed to write all of these characters, like, as their own very distinct individuals. Like, you know, I mean, there are lots of good moments, right? Of course, like, you know, the confrontation with Tanaka, Gotcha Gamer in the parking lot, or, like, Sekiguchi's reaction when Yano is has been so clowned on by by Dobu's plot that Yano stops rapping.
Can I point out real quick? Okay. I was a little disappointed in how, after building up Yano to be, like, such this like intimidating villain or whatever, I was disappointed how easily he got fooled by that scheme. But
I actually kind of like it because, in a lot of ways, right, like, Yano is consistently portrayed as sort of a new money gangster, right? Like,
yeah,
like, he's you know, he's not your old man's thug, right? And he is constantly compared to Dobu. It's like, Dobu's old school. He's a thug with a gun. But, like, Dobu is super cunning, right? Like Dobu is actually, like, really is like pretty fucking canny. To quote to quote something from the franchise Warhammer 40K.
Okay, go ahead.
Sometimes one can be brutally cunning, but one can also be cunningly brutal. And I think in a lot of ways that describes Yano and Dobu. Like, they are, like, as much as they insist that they are different types of gangsters, they are kind of cut from the same cloth. But, like, whether the cunning part or the brutal part is more, like, prominent is kind of what differs for those two, right? Like, Yano is very much, like, new money gangster, this kind of snide, you know, millennial, like, caricature. But, like, he's also the dude who helps dispose of Yuki Mitsuya's body.
Right.
Like, he is the one who makes Kakihana call his mom while he's kidnapped. Like, he is a pretty cruel individual. And then Dobu, on the other hand, like, very much, like, I think Dobu purposely leans into the, like, dumb thug, like, stereotype, right? Like, it almost feels like an affectation, right? Like, I'm just a big dumb gangster who throws his fists. But, like, the reveal about him being Ditch 11, the reveal that he's the one who ran the scam on Gotcha Gamer, like, all those years ago with the eraser. He's a pretty, like, savvy dude, like, underneath, like, the thuggish exterior.
Right. They almost flipped the script a little bit with them in the last episode, where Yano's the one, even though Yano isn't necessarily the one physically beating up people, his henchmen are, like, just, you know, like, they beat up one of the cop brothers. I can't remember their names.
Daimon.
And Dobu is more the one that actually has a plan here. But
there's one thing I did notice, and one, like, I want to just say it now, just in case it comes up when we watch it tomorrow. That bit about that, they made a real point of pointing out that the guy with the gun,
Gotcha Gamer guy,
Hajime, the gun should have been out of bullets. So where's he getting bullets from?
Well,
earlier on.
So that's the thing I actually really liked about that moment is. So me and Iro actually kind of saw this coming, which is why it was extremely satisfying, because, like, Iro and I knew from the beginning of that scene that Dobu was going to get shot, because Dobu made, and this is the fun thing about a mystery, right? Is also when a character makes a fatal miscalculation.
Right.
And that
No,
is what
they
Dobu,
definitely telegraphed that one.
right, and
that scene, right.
maybe even Peter has fallen for this. Is that's not Gotcha Gamer shooting Dobu at the warehouse. That's one of the Daimon brothers.
Oh.
If you go back, it's a different gun being fired. Like
one quick shot of the gun.
Right. It is a different type of revolver than the one that the Gotcha Gamer has. And so, but that's the thing. Dobu thinks that's the Gotcha Gamer, right? So that is why Dobu is allows himself to be so confident, because he's like, you fired 6 shots, kid. I know how many bullets.
There's also a line earlier in this latest episode, like at the precinct or whatever, where 2 guys are talking about how
they mentioned that he lost
one
his gun
of them's like lost their gun, or is like filing paperwork for why they discharged their weapon or so, like
Right.
Yeah. So the implication is that, like, and I think by this point we can confirm it is Little Daimon. That Little Daimon is like actually like sincere about his weird justice like craziness, and he is the one who took a shot at Dobu at the warehouse upon hearing from Otokawa that Dobu is a villain of justice. And so that's a thing, right? Like, Dobu makes that fatal miscalculation, right? He goes in there so confident because he thinks he is so self-assured that that gun is empty. When like, again, this is like why Ira and I were like fucking like jumping out of our seats, because we knew that gun's not empty. He's only fired 5 shots. And that is what leads to like that great sense of dread that is mounting, right? Because as with the eraser and Otokawa and the stuff about the phone and all this stuff, right? Like Gotcha Gamer is growing increasingly deranged with every single reveal, and he is like getting closer and closer to pulling the trigger, right? And the constant refrain is like, oh god, who is he going to shoot with this last bullet, Dobu or Otokawa? And the moment Dobu steps up and is like, fucking shoot me, kid, I know you're bluffing, and then immediately gets shot, is like, it's so satisfying, because you can see it coming from
to me it was like the eraser falls out of Otokawa's pocket, and you spend 2 seconds going, oh fuck, and then Dobu, who just doesn't give a shit, is like, I thought that used to be mine.
Right.
It's like, oh my god.
The fun thing about the scene, right, is you're watching a car crash in slow motion.
Right, I mean, they have no idea.
Dobu digs his own grave.
Right. I mean, yeah, they would have no way of knowing what that eraser means, right?
Right. Well, that's the fun thing, exactly. It's like that's the thing. Like, Otokawa is like completely perturbed by what is going on, because he doesn't know why Tanaka is trying to kill him. Right? He's just like he gets out of that taxi and he's just like,
sorry, I almost hit you.
You're right.
I guess.
I'm really sorry.
I have no idea what you're talking about, dude.
I have no idea why this has got you mad enough to point a gun at me, but it's a really, like, the way the characters have been defined up till now, and so the ways in which they interact with each other is so satisfying when they like clash with each other. And like, man, fucking props to Otokawa, right? Because, like, again, Otokawa didn't plan this, right? He plants the tracker in Dobu's van because, like, he just needs some kind of wild card to disrupt Dobu. He's not even sure if it'll work, right? Like,
he just knows Dobu wants the gun back.
Yeah, and it's
like, I kind of like that his plan just went out the window, like, and they've kind of been figuring it out as they go now, because they made, like, the previous episodes when they were writing it out, like, it's like, okay, well, I guess this is what we're doing now, and then very quickly that got derailed, and but yeah, I think I think the characters are kind of the strong point here, because, like, I appreciate the I don't know if I would say depth, but there is some, like, good and bad in, like, every character, right?
Oh,
like,
totally. Right.
There's I'll say it. They have some depth to them.
Otokawa's fucking leaving that dude to bleed out in the pavement.
Otokawa explicitly leaves Dobu to bleed out. Like, if that is not the most cold-blooded thing you've seen in this show.
Yeah. And, I mean, we got a second chance for final predictions here, so I didn't think we would have an opportunity. So does anybody want to make any other wild predictions of what's going to happen in the last episode? Like, what's up with Otokawa? What's, who killed, I can't remember her name right
Yuki
now.
Mitsuya.
Yes.
That's the thing we haven't talked about, actually, is that is the episode that has aired since we last podcasted, is the reveal of Yuki Mitsuya's fate, right? That she is the body that was fished up in the
right,
harbor.
Yes.
That she was murdered under fucking some real weird circumstances, right? We get that we sort of get that Gotcha Gamer episode, but for Nikaido, the main idol,
Right.
And I'm really curious where that's gonna go, right? Because
What are the odds that she did actually kill her?
I don't think she did. At least we have to assume that her flashback is being told
right in good
sincerely,
faith.
In good faith. Then we have to assume that she did not actually kill her. But Yamamoto, the manager, what was he doing there so late at night, right?
Right, and he immediately asked, "Did you kill her?"
Right, and he immediately has a plan to deal with it.
Let me call a guy.
Yeah, he's got Yano on speed dial. Right.
I'm also not entirely willing to write out the replacement idol yet either. The fourth that they bring in to replace Yuki. By the way, I also want to point out, I also called that back in episode 2 or 3 when I noticed that they had different eye colors. But I'm not gonna go as far as say Fried Chicken Cat is the killer, but she seemed awfully ready to replace Yuki sight unseen.
She does say she would do anything at some point.
She put the phone in Otokawa's cab for Gotcha Dude.
And so because we don't have, and again, I'm not saying her putting the phone in the cab means she's the killer, but it does mean that she is not a character who is entirely forthright with us yet. Right. And in a murder mystery, any characters whose morals are still an unknown factor,
yes,
can be a suspect, right? So
yeah.
I'm not saying she's the killer, but if that's the reveal, I'm ready for it. I could see that being the...
Yeah. I think that's more likely than Nikaido, but she did also say she was ready to kill her.
Well, that's the thing, right? So, I mean, that's the funny about Nikaido's character that I really like, is that she basically feels as guilty as if she had actually killed Yuki, because the intent was there, she just didn't carry out the action. And so there's a fun dynamic there. I'm really looking forward. I'm really looking forward to how this all plays out. The only prediction I think I have is that, based on that preview and Otokawa's fear of drowning, Otokawa totally drives that taxi into the ocean.
Oh
right?
yeah,
that is what's going on there. And as he's drowning, he has his flashback that explains everything.
Right. All right.
But I don't know. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, G.
One last shout out, because I have to. Apparently to promote Odd Taxi, in addition to the soundtrack, they are releasing 2 other albums that are supposed to be in universe. One is released by is supposed to be Mystery Kiss's debut album, so it will be actually sung by the in universe idols. The other
is Yano raps.
Is Yano's mixtape.
All right. Yep.
Okay, so I don't think we talked about this on air, but I was not impressed with Yano's rapping in the show.
But once you listen to the dude who
But when
voices
you hear him on an actual track, because they put out that one little promo thing where he's that little video where he's sitting in the chair by the fireplace rapping, and it's okay, this is this guy is actually pretty good.
He can actually go,
when you get a beat under him.
Yeah, the artist who voices Yano is known as Meteor. I've listened to his albums since then. He's decent. He's actually pretty good. But the thing I actually want to point out that is extremely funny to me is that Yano's album, I'm just going to throw these into the Discord, so that's not going to help people listening. So Yano's mixtape is called 2019, and it is explicitly a reference to one of my favorite mixtapes, which is Joey Badass's 1999. Which I don't get to talk about. I don't get to talk about hip hop often in this podcast. So
I love when anime does this.
Yes, it's extremely
where they
funny.
co-opt an actual.
It's very good. Also, as an aside, Jel, I know you are kind of a boomer when it comes to your taste in hip hop.
Yes.
So I would actually say you might want to check out Joey Badass's 1999. The funny thing, it was recorded in 2012, but it is explicitly like styled like
the 90s. Yeah,
like
there's
90s style hip hop. So,
there's some new guys out there I like, but they're
yeah,
usually emulating 90s.
Right, so I would recommend you give 1999 a listen if you have the
right.
time. I especially recommend the song Hard Knocks, I think it's called.
All right,
We
I'll
need to
check
move
that
on.
out.
We need to move on.
I had to give a shout out, man. How often do I get to talk about hip hop in this podcast?
Surprisingly often.
Also, Odd Taxi did put the gacha game, the zoo game, up on
Yes,
their
you
website
can, you
or
can
something.
roll for your SSR Dodo.
I did get my SSR Dodo because that's how my
course you
gacha luck
would.
works. I just want to tell everybody that.
Fair.
All right. Well, it's in. We'll see where the hand of fate takes us on that last episode, and hopefully we get a good conclusion. All right. Let's talk about Godzilla Singular Point. Unfortunately, I did not have time to watch more of this. I did want to, but it's been a busy 2 weeks for me.
Fair.
But it's done now.
It is over.
All right.
Jet Jaguar, the people's hero, has...
Oh, we have another people's hero. That's right.
Oh yeah, yeah. Let me tell you about
So,
Ballad of Jet Jaguar. Like,
Jet Jaguar.
This show
died
has the
so
number
that
one
mankind
AI
may
buddy.
live. I might. So maybe if we're talking about in terms of scale of what they accomplished, Jet Jaguar died so that our dimension may survive.
Okay.
So basically, to recap real quickly, I'm going to cut out a lot of the techno babble, but long story short, Godzilla has been evolving throughout the whole show because of archetype, because of the red dust that has been like terraforming the dimension. And it's all kind of coming to a head in like what is known as the capital C catastrophe that will like irreversibly destroy this dimension.
Yep.
The sort of like the back of the box talking point is that Singular Point's take on the kaiju is basically, what if the kaiju were a math problem? Like what if the existential threat they represented to our universe,
It's to our
was
very
like,
laws of physics. Like,
right, exactly. And so the catastrophe is coming to a head. Everything's going bad. Like the sky and the ocean are blood red. The world is like very much like on the verge of like irreversible destruction.
Mm-hmm.
And the key to saving it all is a code. There is a code that is written in the depths of the notes of Ashihara, a scientist who originally discovered Godzilla and the Singular Points.
So we kind of have two groups of, one is the guys with Jet Jaguar trying to do something in Tokyo, and while the other is the scientist girl going to like science lab to try and calculate the math to fix the catastrophe, to prevent the catastrophe.
Right. And the implication this whole time is that time in this version of its sci-fi is in some ways a closed loop, right? That an altered past, an altered present means that the past has already been changed. Basically, if time travel exists, then time travel has already occurred, no matter where in the timeline you are.
Right.
And so the discovery is that the whole time, May is the name of the scientist girl. She has been texting Yu Arakawa, the main character of the other side of things with Jet Jaguar. They've been texting each other this whole time, trying to figure out the solution to the catastrophe.
Right.
And it turns out that in their text messages is the code. The code has been laced into their text messages. Not intentionally, but more like because this conversation will always happen, somehow Ashihara, who used the power of like
To calculate the
archetype,
future or whatever, like...
to calculate the future,
Right.
has figured out that in this conversation is a way to embed the code.
Right.
Of
It's like they find his notes, and it's like, oh, it's a series of dates and times, and those dates and times are every, like, text back and forth between them, and including ones that have not yet happened. And so,
Yes.
like, wait, the final text, I'm getting it, like, 4 days from now. Like, we just have to wait, and that'll be the key to stopping the catastrophe.
Right. And
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
really and so the escalation reaches the point where the problem then becomes, oh, the text will not come in time. The catastrophe is happening. We cannot stop it, right? Like the text just will not
Go through or whatever.
will
yeah.
not go through. And this whole time, by the way, we have upgraded Jet Jaguar to Jet Jaguar PP. Because Jet Jaguar has merged its consciousness with the Pero AI that
Pero 2,
Arakawa has developed. Well, no. Pero 2 is not merged yet.
That's right. You're right.
Not yet. So
what happens is they're driving, and Jet Jaguar is like shutting down for update, and they're like, "What update? We didn't write an update."
And it turns out that Jet Jaguar has been upgraded because it is beginning to receive parts of this code
from the future.
Because it turns out that Jet Jaguar is the medium in which this code will be communicated to save this dimension. That Jet Jaguar is the physical embodiment of that code. And so we receive Jet Jaguar Invincible, who has been given the quote-unquote invincibility program, whose only parameter is develop your AI in whatever means necessary in order to save the universe. But the code is incomplete, right?
Because whoever wrote this must have really loved Jet Jaguar.
It's great. It's great. And so this whole time, to give some context, May and you have both been accompanied by a copy of the Pero AI. Yu's is the original. May's is one she downloaded off of his GitHub, basically, and that is known as Pero 2.
Yes.
And
I think that's in the first episode or two that happened.
So Pero 2 is kind of tasked with going into the sort of dimensional supercomputer that Ashihara created.
The singular point.
The titular singular point to try to find the code in it that will allow it to save the universe.
Some super hacking.
Yes, basically. But again, the realization is there's not enough time. So what Pero 2 decides to do is use what is available of the code to send itself far enough back in time to have enough time to finish completing the code. God. What this essentially does is this completes the time loop, because what happens is that Pero 2 merges with Pero 1 inside of Jet Jaguar to create the progeny that is known as Jet Jaguar PP, who is the embodiment of hundreds or thousands or implied to be even millions of time cycles repeated over and over again until Jet Jaguar is advanced enough to harness the power of Archetype to complete the Jet Jaguar invincibility program to save the universe, which culminates in Jet Jaguar using the power of Archetype to utilize Jet Jaguar's original titular power to grow large. So Jet Jaguar grows to the size of Godzilla and dropkicks Godzilla to save the universe.
Jet Jaguar, yep.
Wow.
Defeats Godzilla canonically. He's more powerful than Godzilla.
Yes, Jet Jaguar then, using the power of the orthogonal diagonalizer, the technology derived by Ashihara from studying Archetype to neutralize Archetype in our dimension, sacrifices himself by basically holding down Godzilla and letting Jet Jaguar lets himself take on the full brunt of the atomic breath to trigger the orthogonal diagonalizer, thus saving the universe at the expense of Jet Jaguar's life.
Jet Jaguar died for our sins.
Yes, quite literally. Fucking I cannot get over fucking Jet Jaguar's sacrifice. We all were talking about fucking Vivy and Matsumoto out here. Fucking Jet Jaguar, fucking also becomes 2D animated in the finale. And it's still the shitty Jet Jaguar from episode 1. It still looks like that Jet Jaguar. It's now 100 feet tall. But he's fucking grappling with Godzilla. He's holding it back. Half of his face is burnt off from the fight. And he just kind of slowly turns to Yu Arakawa. And he's just he's just arigato, Yu Arakawa. Thank you for giving me life. Sayonara. And fucking, oh man. It's it fucked me up so good. He says that, and then he is obliterated by the atomic breath. But in doing so, the universe is saved.
I don't know how to follow that
silly,
up.
Yep.
It's so good.
Singular point was all right.
So
there's a lot of technobabble, but go ahead.
That is the thing. So, at the end of the day, I really loved Singular Point. I think if you put a gun to my head, it is probably in a sort of distant number 4 or 5 spot for me of this season. But I also think that it largely manages to achieve the scope of its ambitions in a way that is satisfying, that I walk away from it mostly happy with what I got. Like,
I mean, would this be number one for you in another season?
It could be. It could be.
Could
In
be.
a different season, this could be my number one. Like, and I'm not just saying that because of Jet Jaguar, but also maybe a little bit because of Jet Jaguar. But like, look, if you are going to watch Godzilla for the kaiju battles, this is not that show.
Right.
It really isn't. But if you are, if the part of Godzilla you like is the part of Godzilla that has always been about the existentialist fear of like unchecked science monstrosity, this is your
Right.
Godzilla.
Right.
Like, this show is all about the implications of
Or if you just
kaiju
like that
and, like,
theme in general, I mean,
Yeah,
whether
yeah, it's
Godzilla's
like-
attached to it or not.
yeah, like this is very much a science thriller, not a standard kaiju sort of
Action thing.
yeah. I will say there's a stinger at the end of the credits in which it reveals that Professor Ashihara,
Still
for
alive
some
somehow.
reason, is still alive after 100 years. And the real singular point, the real motivation behind the mastery of archetype and the singular point was so that he could build Mechagodzilla. And the final shot
that's
is showing the prototype Mechagodzilla being developed.
That's a good drop.
It's really good.
So is season 2 going to be Jet Jaguar versus Mechagodzilla?
That might be it. That might be where they're going.
Well,
here.
Jet Jaguar is dead now, so he died
this,
for our
yes,
sins.
yes, he died
But,
for our sins, but like Jesus, Jet Jaguar will return.
Yes.
It's
All
it's
right.
really good. Like, again, you have to be okay with the technobabble. It is very heavy. This story was written by, my understanding is, a former like PhD like
Physicist.
accredited physicist.
Yeah.
So like, it is very like up its own ass about the technobabble. But I
Right.
think that technobabble generally serves a narrative purpose, and so as a result, like I mostly come away from Godzilla Singular Point really pleased with what we got.
All right. Well, you can officially watch that on Netflix in like 6 months or something. So.
I
Yeah.
think it might actually be out now.
Oh,
I heard something about like I think Singular Point's already out on Netflix.
okay. Maybe they're speeding things up.
So
I'm checking. Yeah, looks like it is.
yeah, so yeah,
All right,
go
out now.
We can say legally, go check out Godzilla Singular Point. It's really
Pretty good.
fun. Jet Jaguar is the GOAT of all time. Of every yes, and as Iro said, Jet Jaguar is now canonically one of the individuals in the Toho Kaiju verse who has canonically defeated Godzilla in battle.
That's quite a claim.
All right.
All right.
All right.
Let's talk about Dynazenon.
Yes, time for the other
Oh.
robot
Is,
savior.
Would Goldburn count as an AI?
So I think Goldburn is the third best AI buddy of the season.
Okay, but we're going to count him though as an AI.
Sure,
Okay.
Robot Dragon.
Wait, who was number 1 then?
it's Jet Jaguar. Jet Jaguar's 1, Matsumoto's 2,
Okay.
Goldburn is 3, the baggage robot
Fido,
is 4.
yeah.
Fido.
Okay. All right. So yeah, Dynazenon, pretty good show.
Yeah.
I think, just as big picture before we get into details, I feel like the ending kind of exposed the weakness we were talking about with the overall meta plot not really being important.
Yeah.
Yes.
I did not feel like the final battle really had a lot of weight to it. But the final battle also didn't need to have a lot of weight to it, if that made sense, because there's so many, like we were so, and I think this was intentional, that like they really wanted the focus to be on the characters resolving their
Right. And I think
personal battles more
Yes,
so than fighting the kaiju. But
And here's the thing where I actually think that still works out, because, like, as I often say about the mecha genre, that at its best, robot fights drive human drama, which in turn drive more robot fights. Rinse and repeat, continue to escalate. This is what mecha does at its best. And I actually do think that... I would actually say that, yes. So Dynazenon is a weird one for me because, like, so much of my perception of it is now altered by the news that we will be getting a third follow-up to the SSSS
Right.
series, right?
right.
And But I do think the fight itself works because, as always in the mecha genre, the fights are often meant to be more an embodiment of like the character's ideals and, you know, those ideals coming into conflict with each other, right? Like, the whole point of that final fight is that every member of Dynazenon has kind of reached a level of self-actualization that gives them the confidence to move forward with their lives, whereas all of the members of the kaiju eugenicists are still lost to their old baggage, right? They can't move on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Mujina finds like worth only in her kaiju battling, and without that she's left aimless. You know, Juga still can't get over fucking Galma's betrayal, right? Like you know, fuck. It's been it's been like 2 weeks for context since we watched the finale. But you know, Suzumu is like adamant that kaiju represent ultimate freedom, right? Like the battle at the end of Dynazenon is sort of the classic like hedonism versus stoicism conflict, right? Like Suzumu embodies hedonism, right? The idea that like kaiju allow us to not be concerned with petty things like morality or societal constraints. With kaiju, we can be truly free. Whereas, like, you know, Yume, you know, or Yomogi's argument, of course, is stoicism, right? The idea that, like, you know, we are all a part of society, and, like, you know, what makes society worth defending are the people we spend it with, right? That we share it with. You know, that is why that is why the mech combines, right? Like, the mech is an analogy for society, right? Like, the mech can only combine and be at its strongest when all of its members like work together and have each other's like interests at heart, right? So like on some level,
even I mean that was like glaringly obvious because they sent, like when they send Knight out by himself and he can't do it because
like by himself he is not sufficient. And so like yes, on some level is just a robot fighting a kaiju, and it looks cool. But also, I do think that, as always, like, I think the thing Akira Amamiya really nails with Dynazenon is that it's all part of the grander tale, right? Like, it is all part of the grander, toku, like, milieu, right? Like, this all, it is all toku, right? The fights, the character development, all of this stuff, like, you know, it is all part of what makes that genre so, like, weirdly compelling and interesting. And I think in that specific regard, I do think that Dynazenon succeeds.
Yeah.
Where I do think that Dynazenon maybe stumbles is in aspects of the meta plot, which, again, I am not one of those lore guys. Right? I am not the guy here saying, oh, like, Dynazenon sucks because it didn't answer all my world-building questions.
Right.
But I do think
and I'm not saying that either, but yeah.
Right, but I would agree that it maybe leaves a little too much on the table by the end. Like, I think that's just the reality of how many episodes they had to work with. But like, it's how I felt in the penultimate episode where I was like, I don't think Dynazenon can answer all of our questions. And I don't think that's necessarily. Sorry, you go ahead.
I think for me the biggest problem with like the meta plot being weak is the eugenicists are not great antagonists. Like, no,
and so the reveal being that they were the only antagonists is a little like...
Right, it felt like there needed to be something else driving them besides, you know, the petty things that they end up kind of revealing at the end.
This show desperately needed its Alexis Carib character.
Right.
Like,
there had to be something else there that was driving them that felt kind of weak to me, which made like I totally agree with what you said of kind of how their issues were paralleling, you know, the good guys, but it's there, but it's kind of weak. Like,
right. I mean,
yeah, they could have driven that home more in some capacity,
and so that's why I think that, like, for the context of the final conflict, I think the character, like the contrast between the heroes and villains is strong enough. But I do think for the story as a whole, I do think that, like, now that we have the news about there being a third follow-up, suddenly Dynazenon feels like a bit of an uncomfortable middle point, if that makes sense, right? Because we don't find out who spread the kaiju seeds in episode 1. Like, if you go back to episode 1, there's that shot of the hand, like, dropping the kaiju seeds into the world. We don't know who that is. And, like, in the world where Dynazenon is the last of the SSSS series, that's a very disappointing finale, right? That's a very weird thing to not address. But in the world where, like, Amamiya can be like, no, don't worry, there's a third thing coming up. We'll answer that then. Right. I'm willing to give them more rope, but it still doesn't help me feel... It doesn't stop me from feeling a little let down by, like, the weird place Dynazenon ends up in as a result.
Mm.
But I think also, like, the characters are so strong in Dynazenon.
Yeah,
like,
so putting aside the slight criticism we have, like, the show's really good, and it's still on fantastic. It's on the strength of the characters, how they're developed, how their development is presented. It's some of the best, and it's fascinating to me that it's some of, like, the best character work we've seen in a long time in an anime, and it's happening within the context of a silly super robot show.
Right, but I mean, that's always been my opinion, is like, yeah, people talk about, oh, mecha anime just a commercial for toys, but I think, like, just because something is a commercial product does not mean it isn't capable of depth and nuance and all of these things that Dynazenon excels at so much, right? Like, in the same hand, like, in the same world in which Dynazenon is getting, like, 6 toy releases from, like, Good Smile, it can also be this show about Yume and Yomigi's relationship and how they complement each other and how they heal together in a very, like, satisfying, heartwarming way, right? Like, this show can do both, and that is what I think makes Amamiya such an impressive director, right? Like,
yeah, I was so impressed with the directing too, even more so than in Gridman. I feel like they went even further into the the long slow pauses and the subtleties and, like, the channeling that old Gainax spirit of, like, we'll stand here and just have the characters look at each other for an uncomfortable long amount of time. I love that kind of thing, and
it's I think, always, I think generally I come across, I arrive at the conclusion that I think Dynazenon would have benefited from a 13th episode, but, like, I think that with the time that they did have, I was largely satisfied with where all the characters ended up, right? Like, obviously Yume and Yomogi get the lion's share of the screen time, but, like, I think there's, like, something really beautiful about, like, Gamma's, like, finale, where, like, if you want to look at things quote-unquote objectively, Gamma basically fails every objective he sets out to do in that show, right? Like, he wants to find the princess, and, from the very beginning, it is a doomed prospect, right? But, like, there's a beauty in, like, the theme of his character of, like...
The side effect, though, was...
Right, like, just because you fail in your initial mission does not mean those efforts were in vain, right? It does not mean that these connections you made were not fruitless, right? It does not mean that the fact that, like, Gamma may have failed to find the woman he swore to protect, but in doing so, he gave hope to these other individuals he crossed paths with, right? He gave light to these other scarred souls that are shining like stars. And I think there's something really wonderful about that. Like, for a character who was initially portrayed as, the wacky, trigger-looking character, I was really, like, impressed with where Gamma's character ended.
Yeah, I really did love how... We talked about this previously. He had an emotional maturity to him that I was not expecting.
Totally, yeah. Like,
I thought he was just going to be the hot-blooded idiot, and he actually had some, like, some depth to him, for lack of a better term.
He had a lot of emotional maturity for a dude who's talking about, there's 3 things you got to uphold.
Right.
And and of course, like, I think I really liked Koyomi's story a lot too. Like, I think that
Koyomi and Chise were kind of neat, because they were kind of approaching story angles that we don't see as often,
right?
With that, even their relationship, where and Koyomi being an actual, like, real adult, was all just different. Angles that we don't see all the time. Whereas I feel like with Yomogi and Yume, that's kind of a little more conventional.
Sure, for sure.
Although they handled their bits superbly as well. Like, it's not the execution was there, but the concept. I mean, it was.
I think the thing that, like, you could say as a whole about, like, Dynazenon's cast is, like, they're all in a better place, but the work isn't done yet, right? Like, Koyomi's got a job, you know, he's getting his life back together, but also, like, at the end of the day, he is still kind of that guy. He's always going to be that guy, right? Chisei is more confident about who she is, but also, like, it's like she's more confident about being a NEET, which is, like, a weird, like, conclusion to arrive at.
She's probably going to run into the same... It kind of feels like she's following in Koyomi's footsteps, but she's just younger, so she's earlier in the process.
Right, and like even with Yume and Yomugi, right? It's like at the end of that episode, right? They're like, "Where's Yume?" And Yume's like, she is kind of that character who's like has that anxiety and antisocial behavior, right? She's still like, even after all of these efforts, she's still like, I don't want to deal with people. Like, can I just not? And Yomugi is going to be the one who's like.
It's not just like, hey, depression and anxiety solved. Woo!
No, but like it's like no, it's like we can't solve it, but I'll be there for you now.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's really wonderfully done. You know,
and I think that's the. And again, this is I've talked about this before. That's ultimately my favorite thing is just how positive the show is. The characters. There's really no conflict between the main team. Like they're all like supportive and empathetic and really care about each other, and I feel like that's actually fairly rare.
I think so,
Usually there'll be some kind of like, the Red Ranger and the Blue Ranger arguing or whatever, and we don't really get any of that. They're always they start out as kind of friendly acquaintances, and then their bond only gets stronger over time. There's not, the conflict is external from that group, and just that again, the depictions of human empathy are much appreciated by me these days. But I think for me that was kind of that kind of being the heart of the series was kind of my favorite thing about it, putting everything else aside.
Oh yeah, totally. I think that like. It's the thing, like, I mean, Dynazenon, along with Nomad, right, kind of felt like the most unnecessary sequel, right? Like, really, we're going to do more Gridman? And I think, again, like Nomad, I think Dynazenon largely manages to justify a return to that universe. And
Dynazenon is really almost becomes its entirely own standalone story, other than, like, Night showing up as, like, a cool side bit.
I think the biggest takeaway I have from Dynazenon in a weird ways is like I'm willing to again, I'm still a little skeptical of them like announcing a third work and then suddenly like retroactively Dynazenon becomes this weird middle stepping point, but like I trust Amamiya so much as a director now.
At
like
this point,
I am willing to like see where he wants to take this story, right?
Yeah,
he has proven that like
we got to put Amamiya up there with anybody really at this point.
He is like directors
I
think at this point he is like not even just at Trigger. I think in the anime industry in general, Amamiya is like one.
That's what I mean. Like any other anime director, he's right up there right now of people to watch.
The man is 4 for 4. Like Inferno Cop, Ninja Slayer, Gridman, Dynazenon. Man doesn't miss. He has not missed once. Like
it's still the most impressive thing to me that the man behind that Inferno Cop can also make something like Dynazenon. But
that is the thing that excites me about Amamiya, right? Is that like, a director like Amaishi I love, but also a director like Amaishi I know what he does, right? I know what he's good at, and so when he does it, I like it because I know that it's the one song he knows, and he can play it better than anyone, right?
Yeah.
Conversely, right, a director like, say, I don't know, like, I don't know, in Ikuhara, right? You know what he's good at, you know what he does, right?
The quote-unquote auteurs that are,
But Amamiya is the dude who can write this beautiful story about characters, like, healing in the company of each other, but also, this is the same show in which the robot fires the missiles and then runs up with the missiles to punch with the missiles.
Yep.
Like, this is the
Get
same
you a director
dude,
who can do both, right?
This is the same director who wrote I Am Also Immune to Bullets. Like, how many directors are capable of shifting tones like that? Like, I don't know. And so that's what's super exciting. Is like Amamiya's next thing can be Gridman cross Dynazenon, Or his next thing could be fucking Inferno Cop 3. I don't care. Either way, I'm excited for it because he has shown that like he is so competent at so many different like tones and genres that like I'm ready to follow this man to the ends of the earth now.
Yeah, he's definitely up there on the list of people to watch for sure. Now we'll just have to figure out what the new one, what the SSSS is going to stand for.
So before the reveal of all of this, my galaxy brain is, what if the third one is SSSS, 5 S's, SSSS Sigma, right? Just like complete
Gridman
the
Sigma,
circle. Yeah, complete the circle here, just to... but it seems like the reveal is it's going to be Gridman cross Dynazenon, so some kind of like crossover movie or something. I think. I'm not willing to throw it out entirely.
No, I'm willing to give them some benefit of the doubt, but that's one of the least likely to succeed directions that I could think of.
Like the post-show crossover movie,
right?
Yeah, like. But also, isn't that Toku in and of itself?
Yeah, it is, but
could it not be
the yearly Kamen Rider Super Sentai team-up movie?
Right, where you gotta,
exactly.
Right,
like
bring them together. All right.
Again, you're right. Premise alone, I'm not sold on it. But if Amamiya is the one handling it, then I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. Because I think so. Here's the thing I feel. I think that Dynazenon cast is mostly done. Like those characters have achieved their goals, and so I think they are largely done. Like as characters,
true.
But like
they took Dynazenon and Goldburn out of their world,
right? With them, right? They went back to the digital world with Dynazenon. So I think Dynazenon will play a part, and I wouldn't be surprised to say maybe Yomogi comes back because he still has his like Kaiju Eugenesis plotline kind of lingering in the back. But like, I think like if they are going to do a crossover in the future, I would like them to move forward with both of those like stories, right? Like if you're gonna make this like a crossover, then make it confidently be a post Dynazenon, post Gridman story, right? Right. Like let us see how those characters have gone forward since then. Don't just return back to the same tropes, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But I guess we'll see.
Yeah. All right.
Great show.
Well, we're pretty much at the end of the list. Is there anything else we want to mention? I know, Peter, you were talking about Shadow's house.
Yeah, I'm. How long can I have?
As long as you want.
I'll try to keep it about 5 minutes.
This was the one with it was like the people had like shadow faces, and then like they get. I'm trying to remember.
So I guess I get the impression basically nobody's watching this show, like even on Twitter, like nobody talks about it, so it's a bit weird. Right. But basically there's this like castle of nobles of some sort, and they are just silhouettes, and they have these quote unquote living dolls that look like humans to act as their faces. I think like literally it's their face.
Okay.
And
like proxy body things, or just the face.
It gets complicated.
Okay.
Like
we'll roll with it.
Yeah, you start off getting introduced to the character of to this Emilico, who is your main character, living doll, and she is serving her mistress Kate, and they generally get along and whatever, and they've got to essentially get to know each other and whatever before the grand reveal. The word I can't remember, but essentially they become full nobles when they reach a certain age and go through this thing.
Do they like combine with each other or something?
Well, you find out that basically like very towards the end. That's where. Yeah. Like
spoilers.
Like
we have a permanent spoilers flag on the GLORIO chat. So.
Like especially for wrap-up podcasts.
Yeah. The so like you meet some of the other people in the house of the Shadows family, and they are walking alongside their living doll who is their face, and you see some who are like fully in tune in that they are like moving exactly together and mimicking their expressions and stuff. But the shadow is the one who speaks, not the face. And that carries on, and eventually there's some weird stuff going on in that when a member of the Shadows family, or one of the silhouettes, gets upset or is unhappy about something, they start emitting soot. Like they are emitting soot, like generally, and that, like these dolls have to clean constantly, and then if enough soot gathers, the soot comes alive, and they've got to...
Becomes a new shadow, or...
No, it comes alive, and they've got to try and get rid of it, because otherwise they could essentially take over these living dolls or whatever, and it starts building and building until, like, towards the end, it's revealed that the Shadow family or whatever are just like these beings that start off as just like a tiny little like creature type thing. It's just a bundle of soot that they then put into essentially shape like a living doll that they've kidnapped from the village that they've got under control. And then
they're trying to like make bodies that they can drive into normal society.
Sort of, yeah, but there seems that they're more than happy to just live in this house and be nobles and have this this entire village under their control, because they like one of the like last week's episode, they show some of the shadows revealing their faces. Like you didn't see their faces before, and then the soot essentially comes down and reveals their face. So they're actually merged into the same being. This happened like last week.
Okay.
Okay.
And then they go down to the village in this train, and then they meet a bunch of people, and then they force someone to drink some coffee-like thing, and that makes them forget who they are, and they become these, or they are essentially brainwashed to think they're living dolls born to serve the shadows.
So the dolls were people?
Yeah, the dolls were just people. It was pretty obvious from the start. But
so is this like a horror thing, or what genre would you say?
I would say it's a mystery. Like, it's very much like making you ask a lot of questions about what's going on, and things very slowly build, but it is very slow. It's almost like a slice of life, but there's also stuff happening.
Okay, like slice of life, but there's like something going on in the background you're trying to figure out.
Yeah, sometimes it comes to the forefront, but like not for very long, and you sort of think, well, that was a bit weird. And I do really appreciate that, with the exception of the two main characters of Emilico and Kate, everyone's face and their shadow are voiced by the same person.
Huh.
Right.
So you've got the face called Lou, who is the face for the shadow Louise, and then you've got Ricky, who is the face for Patrick, and so on. And each pair are voiced by the same person, with the exception of Emilico and Kate, because they act so different, and they're voiced by different people and named differently. Like, tradition is that the name of the face that is given by the master is similar to the shadows, but
So are these two like are the main ones like different somehow, or they're not going to become a Gestalt being or something?
Well, Kate seems to be fighting against the whole like the way things are, and Emilico is just sort of taken along for the ride, sort of.
Sounds like a very unique concept.
It is, and like it's based off a manga. There's a duo did it called Somato, who used to be in the manga studio for Golgo 13. And they
seems like a departure.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like they've done a huge, like, this is the first anime that's been attributed to them, but they've done a few other bits of manga. Like, they've done they were part of a Madoka Magica anthology and an Idolmaster anthology. But they also have a manga called Kuro, which I heard about recently, which is sort of about someone living alone in a huge mansion with this cat that it has like a maw for a face, and that one's also slice of life, but there's
Right, like the lineage is there for this type of.
They like people living isolated in a mansion stories. Huh?
Yeah, and the village around them is like going completely batshit, whereas with the people inside the mansion are just sort of living normally and slowly learning about what's going on everywhere else.
So did this end? The anime end?
Shadow's House has one episode left next Saturday.
How are you feeling about the ending?
It feels like there's not going to be I think is the manga still going?
They're just gonna have to find a stopping point.
Yeah, I've heard that they did consult with the mangaka to like create a self-contained anime. Though.
Oh, anime only ending.
Right, because
those always go swimmingly.
So yeah, last week and this week are sort of getting up to a finale of like someone being kidnapped and it needs being resolved. But
some last minute drama.
Yeah, but I certainly don't think that it's going to have resolve everything.
Okay.
All right.
Would you is this a recommend people watch it?
I would say so. I know who was it who wrote on it on the blog? Because like there was
Collins.
No, it was because I wrote the main article. Artemis. It was Artemis.
Yeah.
Artemis has a different opinion, particularly about Emilico just not wearing a lot for a bit in the early episodes. But it was
so there's some there's some.
I think it's fair to like
caveats.
Sure, like there's always going to be that discourse about any anime, right? Like people are going to come to them for different things, or have their different like breaking points, right? So,
right.
Yeah.
Your tolerance may vary for that kind of thing.
It does sound like, based on what you've talked about, that like you think it is at least something that is worth like checking out, especially if you are interested in this kind of subject matter and genre.
Yeah, like I think for this is like they're not naked. I should point out it is like Victorian undergarments and stuff, and whether you see that as like underwear or whether you just see it as it's just what they're wearing or whatever, and it gets a bit weird. But like that is just like early episode. Like it certainly picks up quite quickly after that.
Right.
Sure.
Hey, I mean, if it's creepy slice of life or something like that, I could be into that. But
I think like that's kind of the crazy thing about this season, right? Is like we have our like 4 or 5 darlings, right? The ones we're like,
and there's still probably more good shows out there that we didn't watch,
right?
Right.
We're like, what are you talking, you fool? It's about these 4 shows, right? But it's like, again, I am not going to speak for these people. I'm not going to speak for their taste because I don't share their taste. But like, I have heard people saying, for the same thing as us is, oh man, this season is so great. And then the shows they list are like Pretty Boy Detective and Zombieland Saga. And like, I don't agree with that take, but like the fact of the matter is that this season is so like,
there's a variety of things too. Yeah.
Like, there are people out there who's like, man, this season is amazing because of
Slime season 2 or whatever.
Tokyo Revengers and Thunderbolt Fantasy season 3, right? Like it's. I think it speaks to like
I mean, I do have respect for Thunderbolt Fantasy. But,
sure, I would love to watch Thunderbolt Fantasy someday. I have seen the GIFs. I think that is a show I need to watch.
When he pulls the Nendoroid out,
it's very good. But,
yes.
But anyways, it's just like this is like an all-rounder season, right? Like in terms of like I think it's just like there's a
probably
lot of
something for everybody.
Very strong works for almost anyone, right? Like of course for us, right, in our tastes, it's like Odd Taxi and Dynazenon and all that stuff. But I do think that like, this is like, if I were to let go of my own personal biases, I think there's probably at least 10 shows this season that I would classify as notable, which is quite impressive for a season of anime.
We didn't even get to talk about
shows that people are actually going to remember a year from now.
I guess the thing, as Iro just said, we haven't even talked about To Your Eternity because it hasn't ended yet.
Yes, that's
something we can actually put off for a while.
Yeah, thank God. Again, I don't want to dog on that show too much, but I really think it says something that that show, which we went in saying,
oh, this is the one, man.
Oh, this is the one, right? To Your Eternity is going to be the one, and I hate
it's
to
not
say,
even top 5. Doesn't even rate.
I don't think it's even top 5 of this season. It's.
Yep. Well, we'll.
I would say Jet Jaguar is a more compelling character than the immortal ageless orb known as Fushi.
We've had quite a few immortal characters, for sure. But all right. Well.
Right.
One last thing real quick.
Oh, boy.
I'm going to put a gun to all your head. What's your favorite show?
Nomad. I think
Nomad?
you put it... Again, it could be recency bias. I haven't watched the end of Odd Taxi yet, and Dynazenon was 2 weeks ago, but I think Nomad ends so strongly, and it commits so much to its, thematic core, and, never deviates from it, that, I am just filled with such a deep respect for what the show accomplished.
Right. Pyro.
I might do Odd Taxi.
Okay.
For how well the web is constructed.
It's very good. Peter.
As much as I want to pick Shadow's House just to be different, I am leaning towards maybe Vivy or Odd Taxi, maybe.
It's tough call.
Yeah,
it's a tough call. It's a close race. It is an unbelievably close race this season.
Yeah, but gun to head, I'd say Vivy.
Okay.
You know what? I think if you put a gun to my head, I might also say Vivy.
Ooh.
All right. Wow.
Sounds like you need to watch Nomad.
Oh, dang.
Well, of course, yes. I have not watched that. And I've said my opinion of season 1 of Megalobox before.
Yeah.
But based on what I've seen, I might have to. It's a real close call between Vivy and probably Dynazenon for me. But
fair. I think again, it is by the thinnest of margins.
you could flip a coin for me on that one. All right. Well, that's gonna do it then. To do our housekeeping, check us out at theglorioblog.com. I'm pretty sure Zig is going to have a lengthy wrap-up post for Dynazenon.
It's out already, I believe. It came out as we were podcasting.
As we were recording. Okay, so that's already out. You can check that out. Of course, we're going to have our first looks of the new season coming up.
Oh, boy.
before we get to next episode, so keep an eye out for those. The anime apocalypse is once again upon us.
But you know what? Let's give a proper send off to spring 2021. I think
it was good.
It was a good one. I will miss it.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's
absolutely. But hey, if next season is as bad as we think it is, I'll finally have some free time on to do other things. But yeah. Yep, so check us out at theglorioblog.com. Follow us on Twitter at theglorioblog. You can follow the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Amazon Music, Podbean, Stitcher. We're also on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. Tell us how you really feel about these shows. Or maybe something we missed, some other show we just didn't get to watch. Hey, Peter, where can we find your radio show?
Oh, if you go to nekadesu.radio, all the info's there.
Awesome. So go check that out as well. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, and we'll catch everybody next time.
Thanks, everyone.